Labor plays a central role in Marx's conceptual framework. It is through a study of labor and how it is exploited that Marx arrived at a timeless critique of capitalism as a mode of production. Consequently, an important question to pose within the conceptual framework is how the product of labor is expressed in money terms. After all, the accumulation of capital is most apparent in the movement from M to M prime, that is to say, from an increase in the quantity of money initially laid out for production. Fortunately, there is a specific term that captures precisely what we are interested in: the monetary expression of labor time, or melt. Put one way, melt is the price of the product that is made by a given unit of labor time. There are a few notable components in melt that warrant elaboration. First, how exactly do we define labor time? To do so usefully, we need to recall the idea of concrete and abstract labor. Concrete labor is the actual specific work of a given production process. As such, concrete labor varies considerably across industries, and even workers. 1 hour of concrete labor in manufacturing is unlikely to be qualitatively equal to 1 hour of concrete labor in agriculture. In fact, there is no way to compare the two, since concrete labor relates to the qualitative characteristics of commodities, their use value. By contrast, abstract labor constitutes exchange value. It is what allows commodities of different qualities to be compared. Abstract labor is the common denominator contained within all commodities, albeit at different quantities. If we were to sum up all the concrete labor in society and all the abstract labor in society, we would of course see a direct correspondence. The amount of labor expended by society is fixed at a given point in time. The question becomes how much abstract labor is contained within each produced commodity. The latter cannot be constant, in no small part because labor has different productivities in different firms or industries. Thus, while a single unit of abstract labor is definitionally identical across any work process, the quantity of abstract labor present in commodities varies. We can think of abstract labor as a standardized unit of measurement of labor, whose quantities are compared in the moment of exchange. Moving to the other component of melt, we need to consider the value produced by labor. Remember that the value of a commodity is given as C plus V plus S, where C is the constant capital consumed for producing the commodity, V is the variable capital expended to reproduce labor, in other words, wages, and S is the surplus value produced by workers above their compensation in wages. Labor therefore produces V plus S. This is the total new value produced in production. It of course does not include C because C is not new value, but instead dead labor from prior production. Let's think again about the economy as a whole. The total new value produced by society can also be thought of as the net product of production, Q. This is the net product because we are once again subtracting what are called the intermediate inputs, the resources and materials expended in the production process. The remainder is precisely the new quantity generated from the production process. Note that the amount of new value produced by society must be contained in the total physical net product. Furthermore, the net product is purchased at some aggregate price P. P reflects all the money expended on the purchase of the net product. Finally, P times Q represents the price of the social net product, or the monetary expression of the new value produced by labor. We can now define melt as a ratio, where melt equals P times Q over L, the price of the net product divided by the total labor used. If we say that society produced 100 units of a net commodity priced at $2 and employed 100 hours of labor, then the melt is $2 per hour of labor. It's important to point out that Marx wrote about money as a commodity. In his time, money was directly linked to actual gold, which as a commodity had its own socially necessary labor time for production. As such, if it took 1 hour of socially necessary labor time to produce 1 ounce of gold, and 1 ounce of gold was fixed to exchange for $1, Then, the monetary expression of socially necessary labor time was simply $1. Of course, we do not live in such a world anymore. We now have paper money that is non-convertible, meaning you cannot take it to a bank and exchange it for some quantity of metal, be it silver, gold, or something else. The idea of melt, however, is unaffected by this transition to inconvertible money. All that matters is that the quantum of living labor exerted in the economy be represented by money. Melt is merely the expression of the stock of paper money that remains after outlays on constant capital, divided by the total labor expended in the economy. Because melt describes the amount of money captured by the exchange of labor's output, it bears considerable significance in capitalist economies. Imagine a global economy with two countries, which together produce a total net product Q. Between these two countries, we can calculate an average quantity of physical output and an average amount of socially necessary labor. That, in effect, means there is a global average monetary expression of labor time. Moreover, global competition in trade results in what is called the law of one price, wherein, absent any barriers, the price of a commodity equalizes. If there were price differences in these competitive markets, sellers would be attracted to the place that would yield them the greatest revenue. Eventually, any differences are competed away, resulting in one global price that both countries must sell their product at. What is important, however, is how each country compares to the global averages we just listed above. If we assume that one country is more productive than the other, then it will have an above-average melt. If we define productivity as the quantity of physical output over the total socially necessary labor time, then it is easy to see that countries with higher productivities will have higher melts. After all, melt is simply the ratio of the total net product over the labor employed to produce it, multiplied by the price that product fetches on the market. Put another way, melt is productivity multiplied by price. Given that prices equalize in the global arena as a result of competition, the main difference between countries is their productivities. Because both countries face a common price for their products, and because productivities are likely to be different, one country will necessarily have a unit value lower than the global price, while the other will have a unit value higher than the global price. Unit value is the inverse of productivity. It is the total socially necessary labor time employed over the total quantity produced. This ratio tells us how much value produced by labor is found in one unit of physical product. A country with higher productivity will have a lower unit value. This is fairly intuitive, since higher productivity means, given an equal employment of socially necessary labor time, a larger quantity of produced goods. This implies that the same amount of value produced by labor is spread across a larger quantity of goods, and thus each good contains a lower amount of value. The reverse is true for the less productive country. The result is that countries with a lower unit value, and thus a higher melt, are overvalued relative to the countries with a higher unit value, and thus a lower melt. This may seem familiar because it is very close to Marx's exposition of transfers of value between companies in Volume 3 of Capital. Additionally, this is the foundation of the theory of unequal exchange posited by Arguri Emmanuel and other important scholars. We have covered unequal exchange many times in prior videos, but perceiving the phenomenon through the lens of melt has hopefully granted us useful insights. We can now think of how the product of one unit of universally comparable labor, that is, abstract labor, can be expressed in different monetary quantities. By definition, this unit of abstract labor is an interchangeable economic atom. It is the same everywhere and can be used to measure qualitatively different labor processes. It ought to be the case, as is implied by conventional economic perspectives, that this abstract labor unit should be equally priced no matter the circumstances. However, we have explored above how this may easily not be the case. The product of one unit of abstract labor may be expressed in different monetary quantities. This disparity is not just an accounting oddity. It reflects a fundamental imbalance in the capitalist mechanism. The possibility that the same effort can be differently compensated explodes mainstream models and thinking. And yet, we know this to be the rule, not the exception. The product of labor in the underdeveloped world is persistently undervalued. It is not just the capitalists of the developed world who benefit from this relationship, but the everyday consumers as well. The lower melt of underdeveloped countries affords us the substantially higher consumption levels that we have grown accustomed to in the last half century. Further obscured by the advent of complex supply chains, this disparity in melts is a critical piece in the puzzle of contemporary capitalism. It is specifically Marx's framework that allows us to consider these inequalities of labor, which are otherwise inarticulable by dominant liberal frameworks.